In 2023, I watched almost 60 movies. Here's my ranking from worst to best. The first tier is the worst of the year. Basically, do not waste your time on these movies. The worst movie of the year was Fool's Paradise. Now, I don't care if you're a fan of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Do not watch this movie. It is a complete waste of your time. Just missing out on the worst movie of the year is Finest Kind. Now, I've already talked about this gem of a movie, but it still is a very bad movie. It just so happens to be the best fun bad movie of the year. The movie that shocked America was Sound of Freedom, as it shared an important topic. Now, if you actually went to go see the movie, you're probably more shocked at how bad the writing, direction, and acting was, as generally the movie is just not good overall. The best thing about Snow Bear was its title, as the movie itself was not funny at all and just poorly directed. The Exorcist Believer is such a complete disservice to the original that I am happy Blumhouse lost almost $400 million and gained the rights to the IP, as it is a lesson to just leave classics alone. Because if you're gonna make an Exorcist movie, at least make it scary and well written. The Marvels made me question what direction the MCU is moving forward, as the movie is a complete mess on all angles. But I don't even blame the filmmakers that much because it's definitely obvious where the studio interfered with the cut. A contender for biggest disappointment of the year is Beau is Afraid, as it's a chaotic mess from a talented auteur that tries too hard to be edgy and grotesque rather than be a good storyteller with a compelling script. Now, I've already talked about Anyone But You, but I'm just going to reiterate that the movie is still more entertaining off-screen than it is on-screen, because on-screen, it just capitalizes on the looks of Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, as it's barely funny and incredibly predictable. After watching Napoleon, I fully now believe that Ridley Scott has officially lost the plot, as the movie's very bad writing, bad direction, and laughable performance from Joaquin Phoenix overall just makes it a fun movie to watch at how bad it is. Another bad movie from a famous director this year was The Killer, as it's just a very boring movie and feels like it's from an amateur director doing his best David Fincher impression. The issue with The Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is that it suffers from a poorly mismanaged plot, as it tries to jam in too much story that it ultimately fails to build up Snow to be the antagonist for the actual series. This might ruffle some feathers, but I wasn't a huge fan of Evil Dead Rise. In my review earlier this year, I basically talked about how it's a good horror movie, but it panders too much to the splatter genre that it fails to develop an actual decent plot. Now, my pretty bad tier list. Movies that aren't good, but have some merit to them. The first movie in this tier list is Shortcomings, and like its title, it is a shortcoming. It's filled with meta humor, and it forces its message so much that the ending just feels like a Darman video. Next on the list is TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Now, I will give credit. The animation style for this movie is very good. The writing, however, is not. It's filled with these forced, corny modern jokes, and the plot is just in itself poorly constructed. If you know me, you know that I'm not a huge fan of Wes Anderson, and Asteroid City is not too far off when I think about the rest of his movies. Too quirky for my liking. Now, Renfield, a movie that has memorable performances from the leads and well-executed action sequences, but the writing is just so corny and very predictable that it just misses the mark entirely. Now, I've already talked about why I didn't like Wonka, but I'm just going to reiterate that if you make a musical, at least make the musical numbers and songs memorable. Where Joyride falters is that it just heavily follows the early 2010s Seth Rogen comedy template, and it just feels like this movie came out 10 years too late. But I will give credit, it does do a lot for representation. The final movie in this tier is The Machine. Now, when this movie came out, I actually rated it a little bit higher, but the more I thought about it, the more I think it's just a cliche action comedy. Now, the decent tier list. And starting now, I'll actually say the rank of the movie too. At 39, we have the Super Mario Bros. Movie. That's actually pretty true to the games, but in the end, it's just a kid's movie. And now for the biggest disappointment of the year, at number 38, we have Maestro. A biopic where we learn nothing about the subject matter, rather we learn so much about Bradley Cooper as he tries his best to try and win an Oscar in what is the most Oscar-baiting movie of the year. At number 37, we have Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. A movie that's basically a boilerplate coming-of-age story. Now, I'm starting to do a bit of a 180 on this movie, as at 36, I have No Hard Feelings. A movie that I rated a little bit lower this year, but the more I thought about it, the more I think it's just a fun rom-com that's led by great chemistry from the two leads. At 35, we have Saw 10, a movie that I'm surprising to say is a decent Saw movie, as it's more narrative focused and helps you actually sympathize with Jigsaw. But it does suffer from the same flaws as other Saw movies. At 34, we have Ferrari, a decent watch that has a simple story with a memorable performance by Penelope Cruz, but is held back by its choppy direction, editing, and technicals. Now this one's for my Indians out there. At number 33, we have Pathaan, a action Bollywood movie that has a lot of fun moments, but in the end suffers from its generic boilerplate template. At 32, we have The Flash. Now this movie was hated on a lot online, but the thing is, I do not have the energy to defend it because I admit it's not that good because it's late to the multiverse party and is saturated with bad CGI. At 31, we have The Creator, a movie with many technical achievements, but in the end, plays way too much to its trope as it's very similar to other sci-fi movies. At 30, we have Creed 3, a movie that tries its hardest to separate itself from Rocky's legacy, as we get some unique features like some cool fighting sequences, but in the end, it's just way too short to have a well-developed plot. At 29, we have Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Now, even though this movie has some memorable moments and has Harrison Ford playing Indy for the last time, its very bad ending and poor chemistry is going to make this a lackluster send-off for one of cinema's biggest characters. The pretty good tier. At 28, we have The Zone of Interest. As a symbol, this movie is good as it uses juxtaposition well to share across its message. But the movie's a little too experimental for my liking. At 27, we have The Boy and the Heron. As an art piece, this movie's beautiful with its animation style and score. But as a story, the plot's a little bit mismanaged. But I will say I did not give this movie a fair shot when I watched it, so I am sorry for that. At 28, we have Self-Reliance, which is basically a safe, fun comedy that emulates the early 2010s comedy style. At 25, we have The Color Purple, which was a pretty good musical with some memorable performances, but in the end had not the best writing and storytelling. At 24, we have Dumb Money, which was an entertaining movie filled with a lot of internet humor, but in the end, just feels like it came out too soon, like Wall Street Bets just happened. At 23, I have Saltburn, which is definitely one of the most talked about movies online this year. Now, I will say it is a very bold attempt, but it goes way too overboard with its grotesque scenes as it cares more to shock than tell a complex story. At 22, I have May December. Now, this was a story that I always knew was eventually going to be told on the big screen, and it actually did a pretty good job at it, as the storytelling is pretty good and the acting is very good from the principal cast. But the scene building is just a little too amateur, like it honestly emulates The Room at times. At 21, I have All of Us Strangers. Now, I do admit my review at the time was a little too harsh for this movie, as the actual themes it does tackle and the way it does it with its blurred perception of reality is very good, along with its very good performance from Andrew Scott. But in the end, it's just a little too convoluted with its storytelling and structure. At 20, I have The Bike Riders, which was a pretty good slice of life into the golden era of Midwest biker gangs, as Jodie Comer's performance and the technicals make this a very interesting movie. Now, this movie actually comes out in June 2024, so if you're a fan of this next movie I'm going to talk about, you'll probably like this one too. And that movie is The Iron Claw at 19. Now, I will say this movie has grown on me so much since I've watched it, as the story is just so captivating and the editing and vibes it creates just makes it such a fun movie, while at the same time just being so emotionally sad. The good tier, which are highlights from this year. At 18 is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. This was just a very entertaining and well-executed action movie. The problem was it came out a week before Barbenheimer, so obviously it's just going to end up being a box office bomb. At 17, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was a good end to James Gunn's staple trilogy, as the writing blends comedy and drama well, and the action sequences are well executed and complemented with great visual effects. At 16, I have Barbie. This feminist powerhouse ended up being the highest grossing movie of the year, and actually exceeded my expectations because it was filled with all these over-the-top funny jokes and had good messages, even though these messages were presented in a bit on-the-nose way. Now, what Barbie was for girls, Air was for guys. And at 15, we got such a fun watch to see how Nike signed Jordan, as it was so obvious that this all-star cast had such a fun time making this movie. But I will say it is a bit safe, as it follows a lot of the same biopic cliches. At 14, I have Tetris, which was actually the first movie I reviewed on this channel. I will say this is one of the most entertaining movies of the year, as you get to see the backstory for Tetris. But I will say you need to suspend your belief when you watch this movie. At 13, we have John Wick 4, which was such a well-executed action movie that it's not only the best in the franchise, but a benchmark for how action movies should be made going forward. Now, these next two movies are my honorable mentions, which were two movies that just missed my top 10. At 12, we have Killers of the Flower Moon, which was a very good movie that was driven by the experience and chemistry of Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and Leonardo DiCaprio, along with a new face in Lily Gladstone, as Scorsese's experience in such topics helped showcase a dark period in American history. But I will say its unnecessarily long runtime holds it back from being something truly great. At 11, I have American Fiction, which was a very good movie in Cord Jefferson's directorial debut, as Jeffrey Wright's performance and the movie's writing propelled this movie into being something very funny, yet profound with its social commentary. Now, my top 10 from the year. At 10 is the Danish film The Promised Land, starring Mads Mikkelsen. Overall, this was just a very polished period drama that was executed well on its direction, cinematography, and acting. At 9, we have Past Lives, which is a masterclass in subtlety, as the writing direction helped tell this profound story between two lovers from distant worlds, and a movie that I'd love to revisit in the future. At 8 is The Holdovers, which is a very profound coming-of-age dramedy that really embodies the time period, as the performances coupled with the writing really shows the impact loneliness has on people. And because of that, this will probably be a staple for me at Christmas time. At 7 is one of my favorite independent movies of the year, Blackberry. This movie did such a good job at emulating tech culture while at the same time blending different genres together to tell a story about a tech company a lot of us don't really know a lot about. At 6 is this year's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, a movie that did not need to go that hard. Godzilla Minus One. This movie is great on both a technical and a literary level, as on a technical level, it has great action sequences, and on a literary level, it's just so deep and symbolic with its writing, as it tackles complex issues like survivor's guilt and what it means to be alive. At 5 is Poor Things, a unique take on the coming-of-age dramedy, as Emma Stone's bold performance coupled with its writing and direction really come together to show the impact society has on an innocent individual. At 4 is my favorite independent movie and comedy of the year, Theater Camp, because this movie was just so funny with its use of mockumentary style and improv. At 3 is Anatomy of a Fall. Now, this movie's incredible writing coupled with its great performance from Sandra Hüller make it a true highlight for this year, as both of these aspects create such a great, complex main character that you both root for and can't trust at the same time, as the more you look for the truth, the more you start to question what is true. At 2, we have Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, a movie that really transcends animation with its brilliant style and incredible writing, as this is now a benchmark for where animated films should go to in the future. And my favorite movie of the year is Oppenheimer, a modern masterpiece that truly transcends the biopic genre, as Nolan delivers a masterclass in direction, writing, and acting, as everything from this movie is truly breathtaking from top to bottom, and he clearly goes to show why he's still my favorite director. And that's my ranking for movies from this year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments.